Hey guys, Ty the Dog Guy here, and what I wanted to do is create a quick video for you. Hopefully this is quick, because these days we're training a lot of service dogs, and we're getting probably 2-3 requests a day for service dogs. And what I'm finding is, in the interest of saving you guys time and saving us time, I wanted to put together an FAQ video and kind of go over just about everything that we've seen. Now, hopefully this answers a lot of your questions, and after this video you'll be able to say, okay, yeah, I think it makes sense to maybe move forward, or maybe not, and that way, you know, we can both save time and move forward in your direction of getting you a service dog. So let me just jump right into it. So first off, there's a lot of questions about service dogs versus therapy dogs versus emotional support dogs. So let me kind of define them backwards. So an emotional support dog, or an ESA, I'm not going to refer to this board because this is just for my notes, never mind. So an ESA is an emotional support animal, and they don't have a lot of rights. You know, sometimes, you know, an ESA can get into like a rental home or an airplane and things like that. But emotional support animals don't have the right to just go into stores. Now, if a store lets you, sure, you have the right, but emotional support animal is not much more than just a pet. And so in any case, for most folks, if they're calling us saying, well, I need the dog to go with me somewhere, they're more referring to a service dog. And so an emotional support animal isn't going to be able to accompany you everywhere, restaurants, movie theaters, you know, stores, stuff like that. Therapy dog is typically referred to as a dog that can like go to hospitals or old folks' homes and kind of bring cheer to people. Therapy dogs have no rights of public access. So a therapy dog cannot go in an airplane, cannot go in a store, cannot go in a restaurant, unless of course like the restaurant allows dogs. But anyway, so therapy dogs have no rights. And then a service dog does have rights. And so what I mean by that is a service dog is a dog that can go into restaurants, airplanes, you know, stores, movie theaters, things like that. Now the difference is between a service dog and an emotional support animal. Again, therapy dog is a whole different classification. That's not even a dog for you. That's a dog that brings cheer to other people. But the difference is a service dog does service tasks. And so if, you know, oftentimes we'll have folks that say, I just want the dog to make me feel better. That's not a task. A task has to be something like, you know, helping somebody who can't see, you know, to find their way around. Or, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when I've got, these are in no particular order here, somebody that has PTSD or anxiety problems, the dog can do what's called a pattern interrupt, you know, where it comes and nudges them and brings them out of a, you know, an anxiety moment, or you know, does blocking in public, you know, blocks between them. And so anyways, the dog has to do task work that mitigates a disability. Simply making you feel good doesn't count. So the dog has to do task work. And if the dog has task work and has obedience at what's called a public access level, then that's a service dog. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, so most folks that call like, I've got this disability, the dog needs to accompany me, that's a service dog, not a therapy dog, not an emotional support animal. And again, it has to do tasks. And so be thinking on that, because when I talk with folks, oftentimes they're like, I have no idea what tasks I want. You know, going into this, you really want to make sure that you know how the dog can help you. All right, can my dog do it? So oftentimes we have folks that come and they say, I've got this dog, I want this dog to be a service dog. Well, it kind of depends on the dog. A service dog needs to be very emotionally stable, very environmentally stable, needs to be a very strong, mentally tough dog. Because for a service dog going into airports, restaurants, stores, it's very, very stressful. So the dog has to have a huge stress tolerance. The dog needs to be social, the dog needs to be, you know, a happy, normal dog. And so typically we'll, you know, if somebody's got a dog, we'll do some testing and see if it looks like it has the aptitude and the capability. But a lot of folks, you know, if they know some of the things we're looking for, know that their dog's going to be disqualified. Like if the dog's prone to being fearful, if it's ever had aggression problems, you know, if it's really anxious or nervous, things like that. These are dogs that even if, you know, we overcome some of these issues through training, aren't going to be good service dogs and aren't really going to qualify as candidates for service dogs. So really for service dogs, what we need are dogs that are very, like I say, just stable, on top of things, you know, very balanced. And so another question we get, is it hard? And I always tell people, expect for the first month or two of having a service dog that it is hard. In fact, your life's not easier that first month or two, it's harder because it's one thing getting the dog trained, it's another thing getting you trained, and it's another thing getting you guys trained as a team. And so when a service dog comes home, there's this learning curve for a month or 2 or 3, where you're really getting on board together on the same team. Not only that, there's other things like it's not as easy to go shopping with a cart at the grocery store with a dog next to you as it is without the dog, or getting on an airplane is not as easy, or taking your dog to work or things like that. So you want to make sure that you're making that value judgment for yourself. I can't make that for you. None of us can make that for you. That's something you need to make for yourself. Is, can I handle the extra stress of taking dogs places? People asking me like, oh, what's your service dog for? Now, ideally they shouldn't do that. That's bad manners. But you need to ask yourself, can I handle the additional stress that comes from a service dog? Now, what we found is that folks that are dedicated to the process, they're going to be in great shape. There's going to be some turbulence for the first month or 2 or 3 or whatever. But as they work through it, the service dog is going to make their life that much better. There's always going to be pressure and stress from a service dog because, again, in public, people are always going to bother you. There's always, you got to pick up your dog's poop and brush your dog. There's always like what comes with dog ownership, especially service dog ownership. But for most folks that really stick with the program, the benefit the service dog brings far outweighs that. But ask yourself that. Ask yourself if you're a dog person. Ask yourself if this extra pressure and stress is down your alley. Can I fly with my service dog? Yes, you can. Obviously, if you have a huge service dog, you're going to have a problem. But yes, you can fly with a service dog. Now, if the service dog isn't behaving, if things like that, you can be kicked off of a plane, kicked out of anywhere. And so yes, you can fly with a service dog, but you need to be a good citizen. You have to have a really well-trained dog. Make sure you're doing it right. Make sure you're being very considerate of other passengers and things like that. Can my dog come to school is a question that we get, because we do a lot of service dogs for kids, and they want to take the dog to school. There's a few things to consider here. You wouldn't want to really send a service dog off with a 5-year-old kid to school by themselves. Now, parents going to school with them, or if they have counselors that are there specifically to help with the service dog. But you've got to take into account like your child's ability. A lot of 8-year-old kids can't remember to brush their teeth, let alone take care of a service dog. And so that's something that needs to be taken into account. But any school that has any sort of federal funding and things like this has to have a service dog policy. And so not every school knows that. So talk with your school and see what their policies are and how they've made the plan to accommodate for service dogs, because there has to be an accommodation policy. But anyway, so yeah, talk with your individual schools to figure out what that is. Okay, again, no particular order here. People want to know about costs. Boy, there's a wide range of costs. And so the costs really boil down to kind of 2 ways that we train. One is what we call owner train, and one is what we call boot camp train. Now, owner train is where we do private sessions with you, and we develop the dog with you. Now, in between those private sessions, you're at home doing all the homework, right? And so we can do this for some service dogs. We can't do this for other service dogs. And what I mean by that is some service dog training is so complex, it doesn't matter how much time we spend with you and teach you, the average dog owner isn't going to get the expertise level up enough in order to be able to do it. So for example, I can change the oil in my car. I don't like to do it, but I can do it. But like rebuilding an engine, it doesn't matter how much that mechanic's trying to help me, I'm not going to be able to rebuild that engine, right? And so it's the same with service dogs. Like a lot of people can get some of the basics, with our help, but if we're talking about very difficult service dog, tasks and things like that, we can't. Like I say, no matter what we do, we're just not going to be able to. So anyways, to give you an idea of pricing, and again, it's going to range on a huge variety, depending on what we're training the dog to do. But owner train is typically, $2,000 and up. And then where the other way is, and up could be up to, $4,000 or $5,000, things like that. Most of our clients will do payment plans with that. But anyways, and then the other side is what we call boot camp. And that's where the dog stays with us and we do the bulk of the training, and then we put you through a handler's course and work with you and show you how to do that. Now, the boot camp training, again, is going to have a wide variety. Typically, I'd say on the low end for certain things, maybe $3,500, all the way up to $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, depending on the task. So I'll talk about tasks a little bit more here in a second. But like I say, it's really that task work that plays the big difference, because most dogs, the public access work, what I mean by that, going into public, being really well behaved obedience-wise in public, for most dogs that's going to be a pretty similar process, but it's the service tasks that make the big difference. So if someone has PTSD and needs a dog to kind of just help them with some anxiety episodes, that's going to be on the lower end. If someone needs seizure work or diabetic alert, that's going to definitely be on the higher end, and there's different factors that come into play there. But it's really the service tasks that make a big difference. We get asked the question a lot, should I do a puppy or an adult dog? There's risks either way. So the risk with a puppy is that you get the puppy, you invest the money, you invest the time, you invest the effort, you start doing the training, and then you get to like 8 or 9 months old and the dog just doesn't have what it takes, didn't have the right temperament. Now that's not something you can really tell at 8 weeks. Sometimes, I mean, there's some 8-week-old puppies that are so nervous or so whatever that we know already, okay, we can't do that. But there's so many puppies that they just seem like normal puppies, and then as they get older, it doesn't look like they had what it took, to be a service dog. So that's a real risk that you have to consider. That the service dog that the service puppy that you get, you might put in time, effort, and money and get to a point and the dog can't do it. So be aware of that. There's a risk. So you can start with a puppy. We always recommend to work with us or to work with somebody to help you find that puppy. Because most of the time when people go off and they find their own dog, they're like, all right, we want to do this one. Most of the time it just doesn't work, just because they didn't know what they were looking for, and of course they wouldn't. It's not like they've done this before. And so, because people all the time are like, well, I heard golden retrievers are good for service work, I just went and got a golden retriever. Well, yeah, but if you line up 10 golden retrievers, maybe 5 of them can be service dogs and 5 of them can't. So just because a dog is of a particular breed, a golden retriever or a Labrador or a German Shepherd or a Labradoodle, just because they are of a certain breed doesn't mean they're going to be able to do the work. And so I always tell people we can look for a certain breed, but we need to evaluate the individuals within that breed. So if we're looking for labs, we have to evaluate individual labs and not just say, okay, any lab can do this, because they can't. Not every lab can, not every golden retriever can. So anyways, that's a risk with a puppy. We often start with adult dogs. And what I mean by adult dog is a dog that's a year or 2 or 3, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit younger, 8 months, 7 months, something like that. But at that point, we can know the temperament much better, and we can jump right into the training. So instead of doing all this, the house training, all that stuff, if we find a dog that's been well socialized, has a good temperament, healthy, we can just jump right into the training of a year-old dog. Whereas with a young dog, we've got to do all this developmental work up ahead of time. And so we prefer starting with that year or 2 old dog. Usually it's cheaper for the owner. Usually they get the dog faster, and usually there's less risk. The advantage of a puppy is if you did pick the puppy right and you've got this great puppy, the advantage is there is that bonding time that can be valuable, but again, there's a lot of risk. And so anyways, folks need to understand that both ways. All right, we get questions a lot. What can they do? I want a service dog. What can they do? Really, it's best if you're starting to think, how can a dog help me, rather than I just want to, coming at from the angle of I want a service dog, you tell me what it can do. You really should, know how a dog wants to help you. But we've trained dogs for people with PTSD, anxiety disorders, autism, seizures, diabetes, mobility problems, wheelchair, crutches, having mobility challenges. We've even done 1 or 2 for folks that are hearing impaired. I'm sure we've done 1 or 2 others for other types of issues here or there. But for people with PTSD and anxiety, we do things like teach the dog to do a pattern interrupt. So when they're feeling stressed, the dog can push them and hopefully kind of pull them out of that mindset. We do things like deep pressure, teach the dog to put deep pressure on them when they're feeling stressed. We do things like blocking, where the dog can block. And then beyond that, there's plenty of things that we have done or can do. It just really depends on what the owner needs. Autism, we do things like, a lot of kids with autism run away. We teach the dog to go find them if they run away. We teach them things like, tethering, so in public they're together, and so the kid's less likely to run away. We help them with tantrums, teach the dog to do things for tantrums. Seizures is one. I don't want to go into a huge tangent here, but if someone's promising you that they can teach the dog to alert you ahead of time that you're going to have a seizure, they're lying, because no one can know that ahead of time. We've had a lot of dogs do what's called seizure alert, where they do, but every person's seizures are different, so it's not like we can guarantee somebody, yes, this dog will tell you ahead of time that you're going to have a seizure. What we can do is seizure response, to where we teach the dog that, hey, when the seizure occurs, bark to get attention, or sit on this person and lick them to bring them out of it, or things like that. And sometimes from that, the dog will actually learn to alert ahead of time. But again, no one can promise you that, and if they are, they're probably trying to steal from you, so watch out there. Diabetic alert, we teach the dog to smell when your blood sugars are going too low or too high. Mobility, things like bracing against you to help you up, or help you upstairs, or pull you a little bit. Grab medication, turn on lights, things like that. Hearing impaired, things like alerting you to somebody ringing the doorbell or your phone or things like that. And so like I say, those are just some general things. There's a million things that can be done, but those are the ones that we tend to do the most. And again, the more difficult that task is, the more that affects the total price, and the more that it affects the ability of whether or not we can even do owner train versus boot camp training. People ask, I'm out of state. Yes, we train dogs for people out of state all the time. They can either come to us when the dog is done, or we can go to them. Of course, that is going to affect the cost if we're going to them. But we definitely do dogs for people out of state. How old should someone be to get a service dog? We've done service dogs for kids as young as 4, and it's worked out really good. I can think of a couple that we've done for kids with autism and other things like that. That's worked out really well. Every now and then someone will contact me with a year-old kid and they want a service dog. I haven't done that just because I can't think of anything a dog can do for a year-old kid. But you have to understand that if you've got that 4-year-old kid or 5-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid, most of the time they're not a primary handler. Now we do teach a dog, how to be handled by young children. But when I say primary handler, I'm talking about the ability to read things, and understand that, like, okay, I've got this dog, I can't just walk into traffic and things like that. Or, the ability to read, okay, here comes a potentially dangerous situation, let's make sure the dog is safe or whatever. So anyways, most of the time little kids aren't going to be the primary handler, mom or dad is, and the dog is there to kind of help with certain tasks and things like that. A question we get asked about a lot is bonding. Is my dog going to bond to me? Dogs, especially if we're choosing the right kind of dog and we choose well, dogs need to bond. On a certain level, they need to have this bond with other people. And so through obedience and through a lot of the task work that we teach, hand feeding, all sorts of stuff like this, we find that dogs bond with their owners. So it's not, it's rarely an issue that dogs don't bond. Now, where I've seen it be an issue is with like kids, where maybe the kid's not as interested, or maybe the kid's not following through on certain things. And there's no way to like force a bond and say, all right, dog, you're going to love this kid. There's no way to do that. There's a lot of things that we can do to help along the process, but yeah, that bond usually isn't an issue, but if it's going to be an issue, that's usually how it occurs. People ask about where can my service dog go. There's 3 governing bodies for service dogs. One is the ADA, which is Americans with Disabilities Act, and that governs service dogs in public. When I say public, I'm talking stores, restaurants, movie theaters, shopping malls, stuff like that. There's what's called the Fair Housing Authority, and that's what regulates service dogs in places like rental homes, condos, apartments, stuff like that. And then there's one, I always forget the name, and it's a long one anyways, but it's the one that regulates service dogs on airplanes. And so we're not in the business of giving legal advice, so I do recommend you go out and do some of your own research. But service dogs do have rights in all of these scenarios. The most common one that people ask about is like in public. And in public, people can ask you 2 questions. Number 1, is this a service dog? So when you walk into Walmart with your dog, you can be asked, is it a service dog? And if it is, of course, you respond yes. And then the next question they can ask legally is, what is the service that this dog provides? And then, of course, you can tell somebody that service. People can't ask for paperwork. People can't ask for certificates or certifications or registry or anything like that. There is no legal basis for them to ask for that. In fact, there are no such thing as legal registries or certifications. And so when you find those online, they're all fake, every one of them. The way that the law currently is written, it specifically states that you don't need one. Therefore, there is no governing body. And so if you see a certification, it's just somebody invented it and is charging you a couple bucks for that certification. there is no legally binding certification out there that exists. And so there's no need to get one or anything like that. The way that this is regulated, like I say, through the ADA, for example, is the dog cannot be a nuisance in public and needs to provide service tasks. And so they've got to be well behaved and not, and also providing these service tasks. And so what that means is, really where it's regulated is in the courts. If there's a problem that comes up and it has to go to court, and it's regulated by individual business owners. When they see service dogs acting inappropriately, they can kick them out. And they have every right to do that if the dog is posing any sort of threat or any sort of potential danger. And that's very, in the eyes of the beholder, something that you as a service dog owner needs to understand. Because if you're in public and your dog wants to go up and say hi to somebody, it might be the friendliest dog in the world, but that person doesn't know it. And so that's where we need to train to a level to where the dog is completely under control and to just a much higher standard than the average pet dog, to where there's no room for anyone thinking that your dog is a potential threat or a danger or a nuisance or anything like that. All right, last question here that we get a lot is, what's the process? What's the process that our company that we go through? And so the process is, first of all, you watch this video, and if everything sounds like, okay, maybe I might want to move forward, then we have a phone conversation where we'll give you, we'll talk a little bit more about, what you're looking for and what you need, give you a general idea on price. I can tell you for PTSD and anxiety, pricing is usually going to be around $3,500 to $5,000. I can tell you for autism, $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000. I can tell you for seizure work, $7,000 to $10,000 to $20,000. For diabetic alert, owner train, it might be $4,000, and then going to like we train, $13,000, $15,000, $20,000. Mobility, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. Hearing impaired, $7,000, $10,000. So anyways, I can tell you that and most of our clients, like I say, do payment plans. We've got plans that stretch out for a year or so at the most. But anyways, the process would be, if everything sounds good in theory, we get on the phone, we chat for a minute, see if everything sounds good. And then, we schedule either an in-person where you come down to our shop here and we chat, or if you're not able to do that because of where you live, you're too far away, we'll schedule like a conference call where we get all the parties involved on the phone, et cetera, make sure that we're very clear on what you want, what we can do, make sure that you like us, that we like you. And then if it looks like we want to move forward, we take a deposit and we start looking for a dog. Once we have the dog, then we start our payment plan and we get to work, and we get you your service dog. And so one other question came to mind that we get: timelines. If we're starting with an adult dog, usually anywhere between 4 weeks and 6 or 7 months of training. So 4 weeks would be something like PTSD, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Diabetic alert might be 5, 6, 7 months of training. So again, it's going to depend on the task work and things like that. So anyways, hopefully this answers a lot of your questions. We do love talking with you, so please don't feel that this video is, we don't want to talk to you. It's just simply, we notice we're spending hours a day on the phone answering these same questions. So let's put together a video, save some of our time, save some of your time. So if you're still thinking, yep, I might want to move forward, might want to, no obligation, let's chat. Let's see if it makes sense to put together a meeting, and hopefully we'll be getting you a service dog and working with you on this program and on this process. So thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.